Hey class, so the last thing that we are going to learn about for the semester is the concept called naysayers. And if you haven't yet, you should also check this concept out in They Say, I Say. It's chapter 6. It's called Planting a Naysayer in Your Text. So when we talk about naysayers, we are talking about in the context of writing, right? So if you're making an argument in a paper and you decide that you want to do what's called planting a naysayer in your text, what that means is that you are purposely putting in a paragraph or interweaving it within your essay someone who disagrees with your argument. So I've given you a bunch of different synonyms, so you have different ways to think about this concept, and you can kind of latch onto whatever one works best for you. So a naysayer is someone who refutes part of your argument or rebukes part of it. You can think of it as a criticism of your argument. You can also think of it as a hater. I had a student say once, and I thought that was a good way to think about it. So it's a person or a voice, a group of people who disagree with part of your argument or all of your argument. So your textbook says that it's beneficial to incorporate naysayers into your writing, and you might ask yourself why you would want to do that. So if you're making an argument, why would you want to bring up a counter argument? Why would you want to add something to your essay that goes against what you're saying? So the reason why we plant naysayers in our text, why we might want to incorporate a naysayer, is because when you anticipate what someone is going to say against your argument, it gives you the opportunity to then develop a response, right? So if you think that someone is going to oppose part of your argument, then you can stop, you can think about what you would say to that opposition, and then that gives you the opportunity to preemptively kind of shut down their argument. It also enhances your credibility to add a naysayer. So when you think about why you trust someone. Often we trust someone because they're fair, right? Because they present both sides of the situation. So if you present a naysayer, then it shows that you're fair, that you're not one-sided, and that you also have done your research and that you understand the full picture of the argument that you're presenting. It also shows respect to your reader, right? So that you don't assume that your reader will just take your argument at face value, that they're critical thinkers that will consider other opinions. So it shows respect to your reader. And then finally, it shows that you believe in your own argument, right? That you're confident enough in what you are arguing that you can present other ideas as well. If we go way back to the start of the semester where we talked about how writing is a conversation and how you're never writing in a vacuum, that you're always adding to something that someone else has said, well, part of creating that conversation is developing that naysayer as well, right? Because when you're having a conversation, not everyone is going to agree with every single thing you say. So putting that naysayer into your writing helps to create that conversation, which in turn improves your writing. And also, I know you guys like this one, if you are writing a paper and you get to use a naysayer, it helps you get closer to that word count. Okay, so we know what a naysayer is. We know that it's some sort of opposition to our argument, and we know there's several benefits to presenting a naysayer. So when you're actually going to do it, if you actually want to put a naysayer in your text, how are you going to go about doing that? So They Say, I Say gives you templates that you can use for developing a naysayer. Just like they gave you templates for meta commentary, for incorporating quotes. There's a bunch of templates in chapter 6. But something else that you want to keep in mind, or some other ideas that you want to keep in mind when you're adding opposition into an argument that you're writing, is that you want to make sure that you explain the opposition's viewpoint fairly, because you think back to that credibility, right? If you don't fairly explain the opposition's viewpoint, then it's going to hurt your credibility. You don't want to make fun of the naysayer. If someone is going to critique part of your argument, or you're anticipating that someone's going to critique part of your argument and you're presenting their critique, you want to do it in a genuine way. You don't want to mock them. You don't want to be sarcastic in tone. And then you have to think about, too, if you're going to add a naysayer to a paper, how are you going to answer that naysayer? This part is important because if you've presented the opposition, then you also need to be able to answer that opposition that you've created. So you need to answer any objections that you've put into your paper thoroughly and persuasively, right? There's also this concept of conceding but standing your ground, and what that means is that you might say, okay, I understand how an opponent might say this, and I see the value in that. However, I still think that my argument is stronger. So with that concept, you're admitting, you're conceding that part of what the naysayer says has value, but that you still stand by your viewpoint. You also want to make sure that you don't dismiss a naysayer without support. So it doesn't do any good for your paper to say something like, well, they're obviously wrong because they're wrong, right? And then to not give any support. So that ties back to credibility too. If you're going to dismiss a naysayer or argue against a naysayer, you need to be able to support what you're saying. Okay, so I mentioned this at the beginning, but if you have not yet read They Say, I Say Chapter 6, Planning a Naysayer in Your Text, you should do so and take notes. And then this PowerPoint and that chapter will get you set up for the final timed writing number 4, where you'll be doing something with naysayers, and then also for your last quiz that you have on naysayers.